When the FBI confirmed the woman named Jane was his sister, missing for 15 years, Ethan felt a tidal wave of relief. But as he sat opposite her in the sterile interview room, there was no recognition, no joy, only a quiet, defensive loyalty to the man who had stolen her. "He's the only father I've ever known," she whispered, and Ethan's long-awaited reunion shattered into a million impossible pieces. He hadn't just found his sister, he'd found a stranger who didn't want to be saved. How do you rescue someone who doesn't believe they're in danger? Stay with us as we explore a brother's incredible fight to bring his sister back from an emotional prison long after she was physically found. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the FBI field office was the only sound for a full minute after she spoke. Ethan stared at the young woman across the metal table. She had their mother's eyes, the same deep brown, but they were hollowed out, missing the spark he remembered from their childhood. Her hair was the same sandy blonde as his, but it was cut short and severe. She was Sarah. The DNA test had confirmed it. But the person sitting in front of him, fidgeting with the hem of a worn gray sweater, was a ghost. He had spent 15 years, more than half his life, preparing for this moment. He'd pictured it 1,000 times. Tears, embraces, a flood of memories returning. He never once imagined this cold, quiet rejection. "His name is Thomas," she said, her voice barely audible. "He's a good man. He took care of me." Ethan felt a hot surge of anger mix with the cold dread in his stomach. A good man? The man who had snatched a 6-year-old girl from her own front yard? The man who had been the subject of his family's nightmares for over a decade? "Sarah," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "That's not your name," she interrupted, looking at the two-way mirror on the wall instead of at him. "My name is Jane. He gave it to me." Ethan's hands clenched into fists under the table. He wanted to scream, to shake her, to force her to see the truth. He had quit a promising engineering career to work with a nonprofit that searched for missing children, all for her. His parents had aged 20 years in the last 15. Their home was a shrine to a little girl who loved purple crayons and chasing butterflies, frozen in time. And here she was, defending the monster who had destroyed their lives. The door opened, and an FBI agent, a woman with a kind but tired face, motioned for him. Time was up. As he stood, he pulled a worn photograph from his wallet. It was of him, age 8, and Sarah, age 6, grinning on a swing set. He slid it across the table. "This was us," he said softly. "Before." She glanced at it for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, then pushed it back toward him. "I don't know those people," she said, her voice flat. He walked out of the room feeling more defeated than he had during any of the thousands of dead-end leads over the years. Finding her was supposed to be the end of the fight, but as he saw his parents' hopeful faces in the waiting area, he knew the real war had just begun. The next few weeks were a blur of confusion and heartbreak. Sarah, or Jane as she insisted on being called, was placed in a transitional facility while the legal case against her captor, Thomas Linwood, was built. Ethan and his parents were allowed supervised visits, each one more painful than the last. She spoke little, and when she did, it was to ask about Thomas, worried about whether he was okay. It was like talking to a brick wall. His mother would bring photo albums, trying to spark a memory, and his father would try to talk about the future, about her coming home. Each attempt was met with a blank stare or a quiet, stubborn defense of the life she had known. They were losing hope, and Ethan could feel the familiar weight of despair settling back over his family. It was his father who finally suggested they needed a different kind of help. "We're not equipped for this, son," he'd said, his voice heavy. "We're trying to heal a wound with Band-Aids when it needs a surgeon. That's how they found Dr. Anya Sharma, a therapist who specialized in complex trauma and reintegration. She was a calm, direct woman who didn't offer false hope. In their first meeting, she laid out the hard truth. You have to stop thinking of her as the Sarah you lost, Dr. Sharma explained, her words precise but not unkind. That little girl was forced to adapt to an impossible situation to survive. The person you're meeting now, Jane, is the result of that survival. She is loyal to her captor because for 15 years he was her entire world. He was her provider, her teacher, her protector, and her punisher. Her brain forged a powerful bond with him out of necessity. It's called Stockholm Syndrome, but that's just a label. For her, it's reality. Ethan felt a deep resistance to the idea. Calling that monster her protector felt like a betrayal. So what do we do? He asked, his frustration evident. How do we get her back? You don't get her back, Dr. Sharma corrected gently. You help her find herself. You can't force it. You can't argue with her reality, because it will only make her retreat further. You have to build a new bridge to her, one based on safety and trust, not on a past she doesn't remember or doesn't want to. She advised them to stop bringing up the past. No more photo albums, no more stories about before. Instead, she told them to just be present, to sit with her, talk about neutral things like the weather or the food, and expect nothing in return. It was agonizing. Ethan felt like he was walking on eggshells. During one visit, he sat in silence with her for 20 minutes. The quiet was thick, with everything unsaid. He desperately wanted to talk about their old treehouse, or the dog they had, but he held back, remembering the doctor's words. He looked at her, so lost and guarded, and a memory surfaced, unbidden. It was a silly lullaby their mother used to sing to them, one about a cricket with a fiddle. Without thinking, he started humming it under his breath. It was barely audible, just a low, soft tune. For the first time, her reaction was different. Her head tilted slightly. Her eyes, usually fixed on a distant point, darted toward him. There was a crease between her eyebrows, a look not of defiance, but of genuine confusion. The defensive mask she wore cracked for just a second. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible shift, but to Ethan, it felt like the sun breaking through the clouds. She quickly looked away, her guard back up, but he had seen it. It was the first sign that Sarah, his Sarah, was still in there somewhere. It was a flicker of hope, but it was enough to keep him going. Just as Ethan felt that small glimmer of hope, the outside world crashed in. The story of the girl in the basement, as the tabloids cruelly dubbed her, was everywhere. News vans camped outside the transitional facility and his parents' home. Pundits on television debated her mental state, with some ignorantly suggesting she might have been a willing participant. The public's judgment became a new antagonist, a constant pressure that made their delicate work even harder. The noise was inescapable. Every headline felt like a personal attack, making Sarah retreat even further. The facility staff reported that she'd spend hours just staring at a wall, refusing to speak to anyone after seeing a news report about her case. But the most dangerous antagonist was Thomas Linwood himself. From his jail cell, he continued to manipulate her. His lawyer would pass along messages, not overt threats, but carefully worded phrases that played on her fears. Thomas is worried about you, the lawyer would say during legal visits. He wants to make sure you're safe from those people who are confusing you. To Ethan, it was poison. To Sarah, it was a lifeline to the only stability she had ever known. Despite the external pressures, Ethan clung to the progress they were making, however small. Following Dr. Sharma's advice, he started focusing on creating new, safe experiences. He learned she had never seen the ocean, so he got permission to take her to a quiet, secluded beach. For an hour, she just stood there, watching the waves roll in, her expression unreadable. He didn't push her to talk. He just stood beside her, a quiet presence. It felt like progress. He even got her to agree to look at one old photo, the one of them on the swing set. This time, she held it for a few seconds before handing it back. Her expression neutral, but not hostile. He and his parents allowed themselves a moment of cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally breaking through. The major setback came on a cold Tuesday night. Ethan got a frantic call from the head of the transitional facility. Sarah was gone. She had vanished from her room. The first wave of panic that hit Ethan was sickeningly familiar, a cold echo of the day she first disappeared. He rushed to the facility, his mind racing through the worst possibilities. Had Linwood arranged for someone to take her? Was she alone and lost on the streets? The police were called, and a search began. It was his mother who found the clue. Under Sarah's mattress was a cheap, prepaid cell phone. They had no idea how she had gotten it. The call log had only one number, dialed multiple times. It belonged to Thomas Linwood's defense attorney. The truth hit Ethan like a physical blow. She hadn't been taken. She had run. She had been trying to get back to him. They found her 3 hours later at a bus station, 10 miles away. She was huddled on a bench, looking small and terrified. She hadn't been trying to reach Linwood, but his lawyer. She was trying to get help for him, believing he was the victim. When Ethan approached her, she flinched away, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand," she cried, the most emotion he had seen from her yet. "He needs me. You're trying to hurt him." Seeing her defend him with such raw desperation, after everything, felt like a knife twisting in his gut. All the small wins, the beach trip, the humming of the lullaby, all of it felt like a lie. He had brought her back to the facility, feeling like a jailer, not a brother. That night, sitting in his car, the crushing weight of 15 years of searching and fighting came down on him. For the first time, he allowed himself to think the unthinkable. Maybe she was too far gone. Maybe the stranger who called herself Jane had truly replaced the sister he had lost forever. The trial of Thomas Linwood was scheduled to begin in 2 months. The district attorney's case was built on a mountain of circumstantial evidence, but it had one major weakness. The victim was unwilling to cooperate. The DA met with Ethan and his parents, his expression grim. "Look, we can probably get a conviction," he said, "but without her testimony, he could be looking at a much lighter sentence. A jury needs to hear it from her. They need to see her and understand what he did." The final test had arrived, and it wasn't for Ethan, but for Sarah. She had to choose. Would she protect the man who had stolen her life? Or would she finally stand up for the little girl she once was? Ethan and his parents were barred from speaking to her about the trial, to avoid any appearance of coercion. It was all in Dr. Sharma's hands. The therapy sessions intensified, but Sarah remained adamant. She would not testify against Thomas. She saw it as a betrayal. Ethan felt completely powerless, forced to watch from the sidelines as his sister's future and his family's chance for justice hung in the balance. The day before she had to make her final decision, Ethan was granted one last visit. He walked into the familiar room at the facility, his heart heavy. He had decided not to pressure her. No begging, no pleading. He sat down opposite her and was quiet for a long time. "I'm not here to talk about the trial," he finally said, his voice soft. "I just wanted to tell you about someone I used to know. A little girl. She was fearless. She thought she could fly, and she tried to jump off the garage roof with a bed sheet as a parachute. I had to tackle her to stop her. He smiled at the memory. She loved the color purple. She drew these crazy purple castles with dragons and talking squirrels. She was so full of light, Sarah. He used her name deliberately. She stiffened, but didn't correct him. He didn't just take you from Mom and Dad and me, Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. He took you from you. He stole that little girl who wanted to fly. She deserves to have her story told. Not for me, not for a jury, but for her. He stood up to leave, placing the worn photo of them on the swing set on the table one last time. Whatever you decide, I'll be there. The next morning, Ethan sat in the courtroom with his parents, a knot of anxiety in his stomach. The prosecutor called his next witness. The state calls Jane Doe. The doors opened, and she walked in, flanked by Dr. Sharma. She looked small and fragile in the cavernous room. She walked to the witness stand and was sworn in. The prosecutor approached her gently. For the record, can you please state your name? Sarah looked down at her hands, then lifted her head. Her eyes scanned the room, passing over Thomas Linwood's cold stare, until they found Ethan's. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a deep breath. In a voice that was quiet but clear and steady, she spoke into the microphone. My name is Sarah Miller. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. His mother burst into silent tears. Ethan felt 15 years of weight lift from his shoulders. It was more than just a name. It was a declaration. It was a choice. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah, her voice growing stronger with every word, told the court everything. She didn't speak with hatred or anger, but with a chilling, heartbreaking clarity. She recounted the lessons, the isolation, the complete control he had over her entire existence. She had not only found her voice, she was reclaiming her life, sentence by sentence. When she was done, the courtroom was utterly silent. She had not just condemned him, she had freed herself. 6 months later, the autumn air was crisp. Ethan walked into a bright, airy community art center. In the back, at a potter's wheel, Sarah was focused, her hands covered in wet clay. She was concentrating so intently she didn't notice him at first. Her hair was growing out, and she wore a simple, purple sweater. She was still quiet, still healing, but the hollowness in her eyes was gone. It had been replaced by a cautious curiosity about the world she was rediscovering. She looked up and gave him a small, genuine smile. Hey, she said softly. He smiled back. Hey, how's it going? It's messy, she laughed, gesturing to the clay, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. On a shelf beside her was a collection of her first attempts, lopsided bowls and crooked mugs, and right in the middle was a small, imperfectly shaped butterfly, painted a familiar shade of purple, a symbol of the fearless little girl and the strong woman she was becoming. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She wasn't Jane the victim or Sarah the missing girl anymore. She was just Sarah, a survivor, slowly, carefully, sculpting a new beginning. Sarah's loyalty to her captor was a survival instinct that almost cost her her freedom. Where do you think the line is between a victim's coping mechanism and their personal responsibility to heal? If this story of resilience and a brother's unwavering hope resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support helps us bring more of these important narratives to light.